If I had known that one cup of coffee could scorch away the last pieces of my dignity, maybe I would have stayed in bed that morning. My name's Margaret. I'm 72 years old, a retired nurse, and until that day, I believed I had a family that loved me. Or at least I thought I did. I was sitting at the kitchen table in my daughter Amanda's house, holding a warm mug between my hands. The sunlight spilled through the window, catching dust in the air, making everything look softer than it really was. Amanda had brewed the coffee the way her husband liked it, strong enough to wake the dead and bitter enough to ruin your day. I never liked it that way, but I didn't complain. I thought it was going to be a quiet morning. Maybe I'd water the plants, maybe read the newspaper if Ethan wasn't hogging the Wi-Fi for his games. I was wrong. So very wrong. Ethan, my 16-year-old grandson, slouched into the kitchen with that lazy grin he always wore when he wanted something. He didn't even bother with pleasantries. He just tossed it out there like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Grandma, can I borrow your credit card? There's this thing I need for my gaming setup." "It's just $5,000. I didn't flinch. I didn't yell. I simply said no. 2 letters. 1 word. But you'd think I'd set the house on fire. The silence that followed was sharp. It wrapped around the room like barbed wire. Amanda didn't say anything at first. She just stood by the counter, arms crossed, tapping her nails against her mug. Her eyes narrowed, and I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. And then, without a single word, her hand shot forward. Not to slap me. No. That would been too honest. She grabbed my coffee mug and tipped it straight into my lap. Scalding hot liquid soaked through my thin pajama pants. The burn was immediate, vicious. I gasped, shot up from my chair, the mug clattering to the floor and shattering into pieces. My leg stung so badly, it took my breath away. But worse than the pain was the humiliation, the sudden realization that my own daughter, my flesh and blood, had done this. Deliberately, calculated, cold. Amanda didn't even blink. "If you're going to be selfish, then maybe it's time you leave." Her voice was steady, almost bored, like she was delivering some company policy. "Either give Ethan what he needs or pack your stuff. We're not running a charity here." Charity. That word cut deeper than the coffee ever could. I stood there trembling, wet, burned. The fabric clung to my skin. The sting pulsed, but the real ache was in my chest. For a moment, I stared at her. Really stared. And I wondered how long it had been since I actually recognized her. Not the daughter I raised. Not the little girl who used to crawl into my lap after nightmares. This woman standing here wasn't her. This was someone else entirely. Someone who had weighed me, measured me, and found me inconvenient. A burden. $5,000. I repeated it, voice shaking. For a child to buy gadgets. Amanda's lips curled into a sneer. "It's not a big deal. You've got money. You've been sitting on it since Dad died. Why are you being so difficult?" I tried to speak, but my voice caught somewhere between anger and disbelief. "I've been paying for this house's utilities," I whispered. "I've never asked you to pay for my medications." She rolled her eyes, folding her arms tighter. "You're lucky I let you stay here at all after your surgery. Remember that. You couldn't even walk without help. I've managed your whole life since then. And now this." The words didn't even sting anymore. They just echoed hollow, like they'd been rehearsed. Like she'd said them to herself over and over until she believed them. Behind her, Ethan stood there, bored, chewing on his thumbnail, waiting. Not once did he move to help me. Not once did he blink. I bent down, hands shaking, grabbing a paper towel to blot at my soaked legs. The burns would heal. Maybe. But this This wound was deeper. Amanda leaned back against the counter like she had all the time in the world. Her smirk never faltered. You either hand over the card or you're out of here by the end of the day. That was it. Not a request. A threat. I glanced down at the floor. The coffee had pooled around the broken ceramic, one jagged little shard sitting near my foot. A sliver of blue flowers printed on the porcelain. A piece of something that used to be whole. A piece of something that used to be mine. Like me. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I stood slowly, turned toward the sink, and rinsed my hands under cold water. The sting from the burn numbed under the flow, but the hollow ache inside only grew louder. I dried my hands on a towel, stared out the window, and let one truth settle into my bones. I wasn't her mother anymore. Not really. I was just an inconvenience with a wallet. It all started about a year ago, right after I had my hip replacement. At the time, Amanda made it sound like a blessing. She insisted I move in with her and Ethan while I recovered. She called it temporary, just until I got back on my feet, and I believed her. She said it would be easier this way. Let me handle your bills, Mom. You should just rest. Her words felt like comfort back then, like someone finally offering me relief after years of doing everything on my own. I was grateful, foolishly grateful. After losing my husband Cliff, I figured maybe this was how family pulled together. The first few weeks felt like exactly that. She cooked for me, drove me to physical therapy, and handled my prescriptions. She even told the neighbors how proud she was to have me there, how she was taking care of her mother. I soaked it all in letting myself believe I was safe, that I was loved. But it didn't take long before little things started to shift. It was subtle at first. She offered to set up online payments for my bills so I wouldn't have to worry. She asked for my login details to help manage my bank account. Just for convenience, she said. Let's simplify things, Mom. I hesitated, but she smiled and made it sound like a kindness. I told myself it was fine. Families help each other, right? Then she started managing my grocery orders. Then my Amazon account. Before long, every package that came to the house was something she ordered on my behalf. Or at least that's what she said. I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. The real shift came when she offered to pick up my mail. It's just easier, Mom. You don't need to worry about walking to the box. I agreed. Why wouldn't I? My hip still ached. My balance wasn't perfect. But slowly, quietly, the world shrank down to the walls of her house. Friends stopped calling. Or maybe I just stopped answering. Amanda always seemed to get to the phone first. She told the bridge club I wasn't feeling well enough to join anymore. She told my church group that I needed rest. I didn't even know until much later that they'd been trying to reach me. I assumed they forgot. Turns out it was Amanda who made me forget how to reach out. Ethan, my grandson, barely noticed me anymore. When I first moved in, he'd at least say hi, maybe sit with me for a few minutes. But as the weeks passed, it changed. He spent his days glued to his gaming setup, barking at strangers online, or yelling at the screen. If he acknowledged me at all, it was to ask for money. Or worse, to remind me how slow I walked or how old I sounded when I asked simple questions. The warmth that filled the house when I first arrived faded fast. Instead of feeling like part of the family, I started feeling like furniture. Something useful but ignored. Amanda handled everything. Or so I thought. She scheduled my doctor appointments, picked up my medications, made decisions about what groceries I needed. I told myself she was being helpful, that I should be grateful someone cared enough to take on the burden. I didn't notice the warning signs back then. The way she started suggesting I let her take care of my insurance paperwork. Or how she laughed when I asked about my bank statement, waving it off like, "Oh, Mom, it's all fine. I'm managing it. You don't need to worry." And for a while, I didn't. I trusted her. She even convinced me to let her link my account to hers for convenience. "Just for paying the bills," she said. "It's temporary, Mom. You'll be back on your feet in no time." I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe that. Because the truth was too painful to look at. Looking back now, I see it so clearly. Each little favor wasn't a favor at all. It was another thread in a web I didn't know was being spun around me. One day I woke up and realized I hadn't touched my own debit card in months. I couldn't remember the last time I logged into my own bank account, or even if I still could. Ethan's requests grew bigger. A new gaming console, a high-end chair, noise-canceling headphones. Sometimes he asked. Sometimes Amanda just told me, "Oh, we got Ethan what he needed. I'll take care of it through your account. He deserves it after working so hard at school." Except he wasn't working hard. He was failing 2 classes and skipping half his assignments. I told myself it was okay, that families help each other, that this was what love looked like. But deep down, something didn't feel right. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a place I was allowed to exist in, as long as I didn't ask questions, as long as I remembered my place. I noticed it the moment I reached for my purse that afternoon. Something felt off. The weight was wrong, too light, almost hollow. My fingers fumbled with the zipper, but even before I opened it, I already knew. My wallet was gone. My heart started pounding so fast it made my ears ring. I dumped everything out onto the bed. A few peppermints, a crumpled tissue, a half-used lipstick, but no wallet. No bank card. No ID. Nothing. Panic tightened my chest. I checked the side pockets, the hidden zipper in the lining, even flipped the bag upside down and shook it. Still nothing. A cold, creeping realization started to settle in. I tried to stay calm, tried to tell myself it must be somewhere else. Maybe I left it in the kitchen. Maybe it fell between the couch cushions. But even as I thought it, I knew I was lying to myself. Then the memory hit me like a punch to the ribs. That day, at the pharmacy after my doctor's appointment, Amanda had insisted on driving me. I remember walking slower than usual, leaning on my cane when she offered to hold my purse. "Just until we got back to the car," she said. She smiled so sweetly, like it was no big deal. I didn't think twice. Why would I? She was my daughter. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. My mind raced, trying to convince myself this was some awful mistake. But deep down, the truth was already sinking its claws in. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was intentional. She had taken it. She had planned this. Maybe not that exact moment, but at some point, she decided my money, my identity, my independence belonged to her now. A wave of nausea rolled through me. I opened the drawer on my nightstand, yanked it all the way out, and rummaged through every scrap of paper. No spare card. No emergency cash. Not even my Medicare card. Gone. All of it. My hands were ice cold, my breathing shallow. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But mostly, I wanted to rewind time to any day before I handed her my purse and thought it was just, "Help." Amanda stood at the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes cold as steel. Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Either give Ethan the money or be out of here by sunset." There was no hesitation, no flicker of doubt. Just the sharp edge of someone who had already made up her mind. Her words weren't a suggestion. They were an ultimatum. Ethan didn't even look up. His thumbs danced across his phone screen, eyes glued to whatever game or video held his attention. Not a glance. Not a word. I stared at him waiting, hoping for some sign of discomfort. Some tiny shred of shame. But there was nothing. Just that blank, glazed-over look of indifference. I felt something shift inside me. Something heavy. Something final. This wasn't a fight. It wasn't even an argument. It was a transaction to them. I was no longer a person in this house. I was an obstacle, an inconvenience standing between them and the money they felt entitled to. My chest tightened, but not from fear, from the sheer weight of that realization. Amanda's mouth curled into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like satisfaction dressed up as cruelty. You've had a free ride long enough, Mom. Don't forget who's been taking care of you since your surgery. Her tone was so matter-of-fact, it almost didn't sound cruel. Almost. But I heard it. Every syllable. Every drop of venom wrapped in fake responsibility. My hands shook, not with weakness, but with something worse. Betrayal. I looked around the kitchen, the same space where I once helped Amanda bake cookies when she was 5. Now it felt foreign, like a place I was trespassing. My eyes drifted back to Ethan. He still hadn't looked at me. Not once. Just waiting for the outcome like this was some side quest in his game. I swallowed hard, fighting the lump forming in my throat. There was nothing left to say. No defense to make. In that moment, I knew. I wasn't Amanda's mother anymore. Not really. I was just a wallet with a heartbeat. And now even that was apparently too much for them to bear. I didn't slam doors. I didn't scream. I simply walked back to the guest room and closed the door behind me. My hands were steady, almost too steady for someone who had just been told to leave their own daughter's house. I reached for the old suitcase sitting at the top of the closet. It hadn't seen daylight in years, but today it slid down easily, like it had been waiting for this moment too. There wasn't much to pack. A few clothes, the small jewelry pouch Cliff gave me on our 30th anniversary, a framed photo of him that had sat quietly on the nightstand, mostly ignored by everyone but me. I folded each item with care, not because they were particularly valuable, but because they were mine. The last pieces of me that hadn't yet been claimed, borrowed, or taken. As I zipped the bag, I noticed how quiet the house was. Amanda wasn't yelling anymore. Ethan wasn't stomping around. No one was banging on the walls, demanding to know what I was doing. That silence used to feel like suffocation. Today, it felt like clarity. It wasn't peace. It was permission. Their permission for me to disappear. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out my phone. My hands hovered for a moment over the contacts, then landed exactly where they needed to. Frank, a man I hadn't called in a long while. Not because we weren't friends, but because somewhere along the way I started believing I didn't deserve friends. The phone rang twice before he picked up. His voice came through steady and warm. You ready? That was it. No pity. No drawn-out sympathy. Just a simple question. Was I ready? I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Yeah, I'm ready. The words tasted strange at first, like speaking them made it all more real. But they also tasted right. 15 minutes later, his old blue pickup pulled into the driveway. I watched him from the window. He didn't rush. He didn't seem nervous or awkward. He just stepped out, walked up the path like he had 1,000 times before, and waited by the front steps. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase, took one last look around the room that was never really mine, and opened the door. The hallway was still. No footsteps. No voices. The kitchen was empty, except for the dull hum of the refrigerator. No one appeared to ask where I was going. No one cared to stop me, not even a glance from the living room. Ethan was probably still glued to his game, Amanda likely scrolling through her phone, perfectly content with her decision to cut me loose. I walked toward the front door, suitcase rolling behind me, each wheel click, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. Frank opened the screen door before I could touch it. His eyes scanned me not like someone checking for wounds, but like someone making sure I was whole. Without a word, he reached for the handle of my suitcase and gave me a small nod. Ready. This time, my answer came faster. Yeah. Let's go. We walked together toward his truck, not looking back. Not once. There was nothing worth looking back at. No memories in that house I wanted to hold on to anymore. Not anymore. As I stepped into the passenger seat, Frank helped guide my leg in, carefully mindful of my hip. That simple gesture almost broke me. Not because it reminded me I needed help, but because it reminded me what help was actually supposed to feel like. It wasn't about control. It wasn't about debt. It was just care. Quiet. Honest. Kind. When the door shut, the sound echoed louder than anything Amanda had said that morning. It was the sound of something ending, or maybe something beginning. As Frank started the engine and pulled away from the curb, I kept my eyes forward. I didn't need to see that house disappear in the rearview mirror. It was already gone. And sitting there watching the streets roll past, I finally understood something that should have been obvious all along. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It never did. It means you've stopped wasting energy explaining yourself to people who never really listened anyway. I didn't waste time arguing. I didn't yell. I didn't even slam a single door. I simply stood up, walked back to the guest room, and closed the door behind me. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the walls, letting the weight of it all sink in. Then I opened the closet and reached for my old suitcase. It was heavier than I remembered, but sturdy. The same one Cliff and I used when we visited the Grand Canyon years ago. Funny how some things survive even when everything else falls apart. I didn't have much to pack. A few cardigans. A pair of slacks. My jewelry pouch that mostly held costume pieces, and a gold locket Cliff gave me when Amanda was born. I folded everything carefully, not because it was expensive, but because it was mine. The last few things in this house that actually belonged to me. I tucked in my old photo album, the one Amanda never bothered to look through anymore, and zipped the bag shut. My hands hovered over the nightstand, debating whether to take the framed picture of Amanda's college graduation. For years, I looked at it with pride. Today, it just felt hollow. I left it behind. I didn't need reminders of a daughter who no longer saw me as family. I grabbed my phone instead and scrolled through my contacts until I found Frank's name. My thumb hovered for a second. Then I tapped call. He picked up before the second ring. His voice was calm, steady. "You ready?" That was all he asked. Not what happened. Not are you okay. Just, you ready? I felt my chest tighten, but not with sadness. With something else. Something solid. Yeah, I'm ready. 15 minutes later, his blue pickup truck pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as he stepped out, hands in his pockets, like he was visiting an old friend, not rescuing someone from their own family. I grabbed the suitcase, wheeled it to the door, and opened it. The house was silent. No footsteps. No Amanda. No Ethan. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint tapping of Ethan's game controller coming from his bedroom. I paused, waiting for something. A door creak. A voice. A sign they cared enough to stop me. But there was nothing. Not a word. Not a glance. Just silence. That silence used to crush me. Today, it set me free. I stepped out onto the porch. Frank met me halfway, his hand naturally reaching for the suitcase handle. "You sure?" he asked, eyes steady. "No pity? No judgment?" I nodded. "Positive." He gave me one small nod in return. "Then let's go." We walked together toward his truck. No rush. No panic. Just two people moving forward. As he opened the passenger door, he reached out, careful with my arm. "Watch your hip." That sentence almost undid me. Not because it reminded me I was fragile, but because it reminded me what real care sounded like. Simple. Gentle. Without expectation. I climbed in, settling against the seat. The fabric was worn but comfortable, familiar, in a way nothing inside that house had felt in months. Frank loaded the suitcase in the back, climbed in behind the wheel, and started the engine. The truck rumbled to life. He pulled out of the driveway, slowly, never once looking back. Neither did I. The farther we drove, the lighter I felt. Not happy. Not yet. But something close. Like breathing after holding it in for too long. The house faded behind us, swallowed by trees and distance. I realized then that I wasn't running away. I was reclaiming something I should have never handed over. Myself. I looked at Frank. He didn't say much. He didn't need to. His presence said everything. Sitting there watching the road unfold in front of me, I whispered something I hadn't dared admit until now. Quiet doesn't mean weak. It never did. Frank's office smelled like old books and fresh coffee. His desk was cluttered, but not messy, just filled with neat stacks of papers, legal pads, and a brass lamp that cast a warm glow over everything. I sat across from him, hands gripping the worn leather armrests, watching as he pulled my folder from the pile like it had been waiting there for years. We started with my notebook. I slid it across the desk, pages thin from being flipped through too many times. My handwriting was shaky in places, but every date, every strange charge was there. Frank flipped through it slowly, his eyes scanning, his brow tightening with each page. PayPal withdrawals at 3 in the morning. A subscription to Netflix under the name Ethantha Boss. Amazon orders for high-end gaming chairs, RGB lighting kits, and hundreds of dollars in computer parts I had never approved. Frank didn't say anything right away. He just kept flipping, marking certain lines with sticky notes. My stomach tightened with every turn of the page. At first, I told myself it might have been a mistake. Maybe a one-time accident. But the list kept growing. Multiple Uber charges on days I never left the house. DoorDash orders I never ate. Payments to stores I'd never even heard of. My heart pounded as the pattern became clearer. This wasn't sloppy bookkeeping. It wasn't an oversight. It was theft. Intentional. Calculated. Layer after layer of tiny cuts I hadn't noticed until now. Frank finally set the notebook down and pulled up the online banking portal. Together we scrolled through the most recent transactions. More PayPal withdrawals. More late-night purchases. Transfers to an account labeled Amanda Savings that I never knew existed. I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't rage. Not exactly. It was colder than that. Sharper. A realization that every time Amanda smiled and told me not to worry, she was covering up another withdrawal. Another theft. Another quiet betrayal. Ethan's name showed up again. Another payment to Steam, another upgrade for some game I'd never even seen. Frank leaned back, fingers steepled under his chin. His voice was low, steady. "This isn't care, Margaret. This is exploitation." I swallowed, my throat dry, but I nodded. The evidence wasn't just numbers on a page. It was a map of how I'd been erased. Slowly, quietly, one transaction at a time. The next morning, Frank set up a meeting with a financial protection specialist who worked specifically with elder fraud cases. Her name was Carla, a sharp-eyed woman with a quiet confidence that instantly made me feel like I wasn't alone in this. She greeted me not with pity, but with purpose, spreading out folders, templates, and checklists across the table like we were preparing for battle. The first step was simple but heavy. We went line by line through every suspicious transaction, matching it with my notebook and Frank's notes. Carla created an official affidavit where I detailed every instance I remembered, every login Amanda had taken, every missing statement. She submitted an emergency request to the bank to freeze all transactions tied to my primary account, locking out Amanda and Ethan from pulling another dime. Then Frank pulled out a file I hadn't seen before. Inside was the title deed to Amanda's house, or what I thought was Amanda's house. But as he slid the paper across the table, I saw my name printed right at the top. The house was still legally mine. My breath caught for a second, followed by a wave of something that felt like relief tangled with disbelief. Somewhere between surgery forms and fake kindness, Amanda had never actually transferred the property fully. It was mine. It had always been mine. Frank's voice was firm but calm as he explained the next step. The safest thing, he said, was to move the property into an irrevocable living trust. Once inside, Amanda couldn't touch it. She couldn't sell it. She couldn't borrow against it. It would be legally protected, untouchable, shielded from anyone who thought they had a claim to it. Carla nodded in agreement, drafting the trust paperwork while Frank guided me through every line. I signed page after page, initials here, full signature there, date on the bottom. Each stroke of the pen felt like a stitch sewing pieces of my life back together. With every signature, the grip Amanda had on me loosened a little more. By the time we finished, the knot in my chest had started to unravel. Not completely, but enough. Enough to believe that maybe this wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was the beginning of finally taking it back. Amanda pulled into the driveway, barely slowing before slamming the car into park. Her brows knit together the second she spotted a woman standing in the front yard, holding a clipboard and a laser measuring tool. Carla, dressed in her navy blazer and sunglasses, looked every bit the professional, calmly pacing the property line while jotting down notes. For a moment, Amanda just stared, confused, like her brain refused to process what her eyes were seeing. Then the panic hit. She jumped out of the car, heels clacking against the pavement, storming toward Carla with her arms already flailing. Her voice cracked the air, sharp and shrill, calling my name over and over. Mom? Mom? What is this? She whipped her head toward the house, like I might come running out to explain. I didn't. Her eyes darted back to Carla, growing wilder by the second. What are you doing here? You can't be here. This is private property. Her hands were trembling fingers, twitching like she couldn't decide whether to wave Carla away or yank the clipboard from her hands. Carla didn't even blink. She tapped a few numbers into her measuring device, nodded to herself, and continued walking the perimeter like Amanda's meltdown was background noise. Amanda's face shifted from confusion to disbelief to full-blown fury. Her mouth opened, but no words came out, just a sputter of half-finished sentences tangled with rage. She pulled out her phone, thumb-jabbing at the screen, calling me over and over. The calls went straight to voicemail. Every time. Her face reddened as the reality started to settle in. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a prank. This was intentional. She spun in circles, pacing the sidewalk, muttering to herself, then yelling at no one. Her hands tugged at her hair, her face scrunched in disbelief. The woman who once thought she controlled every corner of my life now stood on that front lawn, helpless watching her illusion of ownership crumble right in front of her. And I wasn't there to explain it. Because I didn't need to. The paperwork was already speaking louder than I ever could. I was sitting in the sunroom at Golden Pines, watching the koi glide lazily beneath the water when I saw them. Amanda storming up the brick path, like a woman on a mission with Ethan, dragging behind her shoulders, hunched thumbs tapping on his phone like none of this was his problem. Her jaw was clenched so tight it looked painful eyes scanning the entrance as if sheer anger could unlock the doors. The front desk caught her before she made it to the lobby. Doris, our head of security, stepped forward with that calm, firm presence only a woman who's handled worse could pull off. Her hands were open, but steady, her voice too low for me to hear, but I knew exactly what she was saying. Guests without approval are not permitted inside. Amanda's arms flew up in wild, exaggerated frustration. Her mouth moved fast words spilling out in sharp bursts. I imagined her listing off every imagined reason why she should be let in. I'm her daughter. This is urgent. She needs to talk to me. Her gestures were big, dramatic, desperate. Ethan stood a few feet back, pretending not to notice, gaze fixed on his phone, rocking back and forth like he wanted to be anywhere else. I watched from behind the tinted glass, perfectly visible to myself, but invisible to them. Amanda pointed toward the reception desk, then toward the seating area, then back to the door, as if trying to will it open through sheer force. Her face twisted from anger to disbelief to something that almost looked like panic. Doris never flinched. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She just stood there, steady as a brick wall. Amanda tried calling. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket, watched her eyes dart down at her screen when it went straight to voicemail. Her lips pressed into a thin-line fingers, gripping the strap of her bag like it was the only thing holding her together. Ethan finally glanced toward the building, saw me through the glass, and for one brief second, our eyes met. He looked away just as quickly, shoving his phone deeper into his pocket, like maybe if he ignored me hard enough, it would erase what this moment really was. Amanda paced back and forth, throwing her hands in the air, snapping at Ethan when he refused to engage. But the longer the silence held, the more powerless she looked. No yelling. No threats. No manipulation could unlock this door. This wasn't her house. This wasn't her kingdom. Not anymore. After 10 long minutes, Amanda gave one final glare toward the building, muttered something under her breath, spun on her heel, and stomped back toward the car. Ethan followed, head down, shoulders slumped, not even pretending to care anymore. I watched until their silhouettes disappeared beyond the hedges, then turned back toward the koi pond. The peace that filled me wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like freedom. Because sometimes the loudest thing you can ever say is absolutely nothing at all. I sat at Frank's kitchen table, pen in hand, staring down at the final stack of documents. The trust paperwork was neat, precise, and absolute. With one signature, every asset I owned shifted out of Amanda's reach forever. The house, the bank accounts, the retirement funds, all wrapped securely inside an irrevocable trust that bore my name and no one else's. My hand didn't shake when I signed. Not this time. Each stroke of ink felt like a lock sliding into place, a barrier against the hands that once took without asking. Frank notarized every page, sliding them into a sealed folder, his eyes steady with approval. The legal shield was ironclad. No loopholes. No back doors. Amanda couldn't touch a dime, not now, not ever. Next came the report. Carla helped me file the formal complaint with the Elder Protection Unit. Every fraudulent charge, every unauthorized transfer, every forged signature. Itemized, documented, backed with statements, screenshots, and my handwritten notes. The evidence wasn't just strong, it was devastating. The courier arrived that afternoon, delivering a set of official notices to Amanda's doorstep. Inside was a letter from the trust's legal counsel printed on heavy cream paper with an embossed seal. The language was cold, clinical, and final. Effective immediately, Amanda Andrews is no longer authorized to access, manage, or benefit from any assets, properties, or financial accounts belonging to Margaret Langley. I imagined her standing there, envelope in hand, mouth falling open as the words sank in. All her schemes, all her control, gone in one letter. No arguments, no negotiations, no second chances. The law had done what my voice never could. It drew a line, permanent, unbreakable. She was legally locked out, and for the first time in far too long, I was free. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the garden at Golden Pines. I sat on my favorite bench beneath the old willow, a soft quilt folded over my lap. Frank sat to my left, sipping iced tea, and Marjorie was on my right, her knitting needles clicking softly in her hands. Around us, the koi pond shimmered in the light, and a soft breeze carried the scent of lemon balm and freshly cut grass. For the first time in what felt like years, my chest felt light. Not empty, not hollow, just unburdened. There was no weight of waiting for the next demand, the next manipulation, the next guilt-laced favor. The silence here was different. It wasn't the silence of being dismissed or ignored. It was the kind of silence that felt like space. Space to breathe. Space to exist. I watched the koi glide in lazy circles, their movements so effortless, it almost made me smile. Marjorie chatted about the upcoming bridge tournament and how the new ladies didn't shuffle their cards properly. Frank listened with that quiet patience only a man who has read too many contracts and too few novels could muster. It all felt simple, honest, safe. I leaned back against the bench and let my gaze drift toward the clouds. Somewhere out there, Amanda was probably still fuming, still pacing, still trying to figure out how everything unraveled without me ever raising my voice. But it didn't matter now. Not anymore. That chapter was closed, sealed with signatures, notarized stamps, and a locked front gate. What surprised me most wasn't how angry she was. It was how little space that anger took up in me now. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need her to understand. I had finally accepted that not every story ends with reconciliation. Some stories end with boundaries. Some end with walking away and never looking back. Frank handed me another glass of tea, his eyes crinkling in that way that always meant he was proud without saying it. Marjorie patted my hand gently, her fingers soft but strong. I realized then that family isn't always the people you are born to. Sometimes family is the people who help you rebuild when others try to tear you apart. I looked out over the pond one more time and felt the words settle inside me, steady and true. When they came for my money, I gave them silence. When they came for my peace, I gave them a locked door.